Good morning and welcome to TVP World News. I'm your host, Diana Skaya. We begin in Syria. Now, Syrians around the globe are celebrating and celebrated the toppling of Bashar al-Assad's dictatorship over the weekend. Now, Russian press agency TASS reported on Sunday that Assad had left Syria and received political asylum in Moscow. Now, after 13 years of civil war, Syrians abroad rejoiced following a rebel victory against the Assad regime. And demonstrators chanted anti-Assad slogans. They held flags of Syrian rebels. In the Lebanese capital of Beirut, people could be heard chanting, "As Assad burned us, he will now burn himself." Now, Syrian rebels swiftly seized Damascus on the weekend, pushing Bashar al-Assad and his family out of the country. U.S. President Joe Biden commented on these developments, commending the rebel forces for overthrowing the dictator and expressed his hope that this would bring more stability to the region. U.S. President Joe Biden gave a televised address on Sunday commenting on the current situation in Syria. Biden claimed that the U.S. will engage with all Syrian groups to ensure a peaceful political transition. At the same time, he noted that some of the rebel groups have their own record of terrorism and human rights abuses.
We will engage with all Syrian groups, including within the process led by the United Nations, to establish a transition away from the Assad regime toward independent, sovereign, I want to say it again, sovereign Syria, with a new constitution, a new government that serves all Syrians. And this process will be determined by the Syrian people themselves. And the United States will do whatever we can to support them.
Moving on now to Georgia, where thousands of pro-Europe protesters rallied in the capital of Georgia in Tbilisi for the 11th consecutive night on Sunday. Now, demonstrations began after the pro-Western opposition and president refused to recognize the ruling Georgian Dream Party's claimed victory in a parliamentary election in late November, citing widespread irregularities. Now, the fresh wave of protests was triggered by Prime Minister Irakli Kobakhidze's announcement that the government would postpone accession talks with the European Union. Now, riot police once again used tear gas and water cannons to disperse the crowd. A Georgian Interior Ministry official Sunday said that 402 protesters had been arrested since November 28th, with more than 30 of them seeing criminal charges. Prime Minister Kobakhidze branded the protesters as opposition-controlled violent groups and liberal fascists and said that their attempted revolution failed. In an interview with NBC News, U.S. President-elect Donald Trump had once again suggested he might withdraw the United States from NATO if the European members don't, quote, pay their bills. Now, this time, however, those bills are more than just a sufficient contribution to defense efforts. Now, speaking to NBC's 60 Minutes, Trump also said that while the U.S. is defending Europe militarily, European countries are, in his eyes, importing too little from the United States. He specifically mentioned cars and food products as items. He wants Europe to treat the U.S., quote, fairly, suggesting he would consider the trade balance as a part of any NATO discussion. Now, as Trump's plan for Ukraine remains unknown, the outgoing administration of President Joe Biden has announced a new $1 billion aid package for the country. Now, this package includes drones and munitions for the HIMARS system. 43,000 soldiers. That's the heartbreaking toll Ukraine has paid in the fight against Russia since the full-scale invasion began. Now, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky shared this staggering figure on Sunday on social media, along with the grim news that 370,000 have been wounded. Now, as the situation in Ukraine intensifies, the international community is stepping up its efforts. European Council President Antonio Costa is calling on EU leaders to unite at a crucial summit in Brussels on December 19.
This Sunday brought some dramatic news from Ukraine. For the first time, President Volodymyr Zelensky announced that 43,000 Ukrainian soldiers have died since the beginning of the war in February 2022.
This is what this war is about. It cannot be ended simply with a piece of paper and a few signatures. A ceasefire without guarantees can be reignited at any moment, as Putin has done before. To guarantee that the losses of Ukrainians will no longer continue, we need to ensure reliable peace and not turn a blind eye to occupation.
Ukraine has also seen 370,000 soldiers wounded in the conflict. Despite this, Zelensky highlighted the resilience of the Ukrainian forces, with nearly 50% of those wounded returning to battle. Brussels was also quite active this Sunday, with the new European Council President Antonio Costa calling on EU leaders to unite in his first European Council meeting in Brussels on December 19th. Costa emphasized that the meeting would send a strong message of solidarity with Ukraine, with President Zelensky joining to share the updates of his country's needs.
The situation in Ukraine will be at the forefront of our discussions. I have just returned from a visit to Kyiv on the first day of my mandate. We need to stand with Ukraine for as long as necessary and do whatever it takes for Russia's invasion to be defeated and international law to prevail.
As the situation in both Ukraine and the Middle East continues to evolve, all eyes are on Washington, where the shift in leadership will be pivotal in shaping the next phase of the conflict. For TVP World, I'm Aisha Badje.
Political turmoil in South Korea continues as enraged civilians took to the streets of the country's capital on the weekend. Now, demonstrators created obstacles to the daily commute of Seoul's residents nearly 1 week after President Yoon Suk-yeol's botched attempt to declare martial law. Now, commuters could be seen retreating past a demonstration at Seoul's central Gwangwamonum Square. The protests caused major traffic jams, exacerbating issues of the already overcrowded South Korean capital. Meanwhile, another protest was organized by the community of South Korean doctors and nurses. Now, already on strike, the introduction of martial law would have forced them to return to their stations within 48 hours or face punishment. Now, similar turmoil could be seen on the Korean stock exchange. The Korea Composite Stock Price Index experienced its largest single-day slump since November 13th. The commander of South Korea's special forces said early Monday morning that he was ordered to block parliamentarians from entering the voting chamber while the country was briefly under martial law. Now, Colonel Kim Hyun-tae told reporters that he was acting under orders from the defense minister. His actions were supposed to prevent a vote which eventually lifted the emergency martial law imposed by President Yoon Suk-yeol.
We were all victims who were used by the former defense minister, Kim Yong-hyun. The members of the 707th Special Mission Group are not guilty. Their only guilt is that they followed the orders of their commander. When I received a call from a commander and was deployed to the National Assembly, I also had no knowledge of martial law. I wasn't aware that the activities of the National Assembly should be guaranteed even under martial law. At the scene, when many people tried to stop me, I explained, I am here under the instructions of the martial law command.
Yesterday evening, Catholics in Paris reunited inside the newly reopened Notre Dame Cathedral. Now, the first public mass after the fire of 2019 brought together some 1,500 people at the holy site. Now, the evening mass followed a consecration mass earlier in the day, which was attended by a number of world leaders, including French President Emmanuel Macron and American President-elect Donald Trump.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, may the Lord be with you. Brothers and sisters, dear friends, what emotion for the rector that I am to see this cathedral full. 5 years after its destruction, here it is standing again. Here it is again, ready to welcome the prayers of the faithful. We were here when it burned. We took our bikes. We lived in the southern district of Paris at the time. We took our bikes and we got behind the cathedral. We were unable to get closer, but we watched with great sadness. We hoped that we'd be able to be here tonight, but we were not sure if we could be. But being able to be here is magnificent.
Honestly, it was really a superb mass. It was magnificent. We really liked the priest's message on hope.
Magnificent. The work of all the craftspeople and of all the artists added to this sacredness to something that for me is already sacred. So it was very powerful, very beautiful reunion.
There were a lot of emotions. We saw quite a few tears. We felt that it is a place that is very important for Catholics, for the French, for Parisians.
"33 African countries will now be able to sell goods to China without any tariffs. Now, this is thanks to a new agreement which went into effect on December 1st. The new regulations will give African producers favorable access to Chinese consumers compared with European and U.S. exporters.
The new trade agreement between China and 33 African countries will remove trading tariffs on goods destined for the Chinese markets. The idea is to create fair trading relations. Earlier in September, China vowed a $51 billion investment, with key projects varying from railways to solar panels, mining and avocado farming on the line. China has been Africa's biggest trading partner since 2000.
China's trade with Africa in intermediate goods posted 6.4% year-on-year growth in the first 7 months of the year, accounting for 68% of the total value of bilateral trade, which assisted Africa in its process of industrialization and economic diversification.
And the cooperation is only expected to tighten as Chinese state-owned enterprises embark on the global mission of greening energy production.
The overall demand in the entire Asia-Pacific market, the Middle East, the Far East, and even developing countries in Africa and South America is very strong. The solutions integrating renewable energy with computing power are also adopted by more countries.
Beijing has long insisted that its trade policy with Africa is transparent and mutually beneficial.
China opposes the creation of camps and polarization in Africa and the use of Africa for private gains. We will continue to carry out our cooperation with Africa in accordance with the concepts of true proximity and sincerity put forward by President Xi Jinping.
But international observers and experts alike remain skeptical, with accusations of Beijing's exploitation of Africa's resources swarming.
If the activity is limited to exploration, to the extraction of metals, Africa will not benefit from energy transition. It is clear that countries rich in metals have seen a worsening of social inequalities and have become richer, but this enrichment has benefited certain parts of the population.
For now, African nations are poised to benefit from Chinese investment. This is just one example. The Karaba hydroelectric power station in Zambia is nearing completion, in part thanks to the $533 million investment from Chinese state-owned companies. Susanna Jurek, TVP World.
And that's all for this edition of World News here this morning. Up next, World Talks with Anya Kalczynska. Don't go away.